This is a brief video explaining working with a raw file using ACR through Photoshop and opening your image as a smart object. So here, if you notice, I have a raw file using ACR. The very first thing that I wish to do is come in here and change something in the options workflow, which was accessed by clicking on the text at the bottom and simply clicking on Open in Photoshop as Smart Objects, Adobe RGB at 16-bit, and hit OK. Go through the process of whatever that you need to do with the raw processing. So I'm going to open up some details, pull back some of the highlights which are washing out, open up a few more shadows, and dull down the whites, open up some of the blacks which were a little bit messy. And let's say I've done this. Now I'm going to sharpen it. So I'm going to sharpen it appropriately and then mask it so that I'm just interested in the highlight regions that become sharper. And that, you may end up doing a few other things or whatever that you may need to do. For example, in here I'm going to desaturate a little bit. Let's say, for the sake of argument, I've got what I want. Now, at the bottom right, there are three buttons. One is Open Object, the other Cancel, and the third one Done. Done would simply save the file and not do anything, and basically it will create an XML file retaining the information of what changes you might have made in the raw processor. Cancel obviously will cancel everything and revert back to the original state. And the first one is Open Object. So if I click on Open Object, it should hopefully open up Photoshop. And within Photoshop, it should open up that particular image as a smart object. And be patient, it takes a little time because these are heavy files. So here I have it. And if I bring about my layer panel over, so you will notice, and I'll enlarge the icon. So go into my panel option, enlarge the icon. You notice there's an additional symbol in the little icon over here. This fundamentally implies that this is a smart object. So let's say at this point in time I decide that, hey, I'm going to make it into a black and white, just for the sake of argument, or whatever changes you wanted to make. So I come in here and do whatever that I need to do to make it look better. There's some green in there and some blues which I don't want too bright. Magentas, and done. And then to further work on it, so I'm doing different things. So I apply a gradient map as well. So now I have done two adjustments. Please remember something. You cannot influence the file as long as it is a smart object at a pixel level. So for example, if I say, hey, something, I want to clone out this little white over here that you see. Now if I tried to and take the stamp or the heal tool, if I come in here on the particular layer that I'm working in, or even if I create a empty layer and say current and below, will it work? Let's hope and see what it does. So I come in here and it works. So it will never work directly on the layer, so you have to every single time create an independent layer. Fair enough? What else? Let's say I wanted to brighten the eyes a little bit and get some more detail in there and so on and so forth. So I'll take this image, duplicate the file, change the blend mode of this particular file to brighten it. And once I have brightened it, I want to change my blend mode in here, which I have done. Then I want to apply a layer mask and invert the layer mask, Command I, and it reverts back. at which point I can then flip the black and white, bring the white in the foreground, take a brush and choose the opacity levels because you want to work on it gradually. So I'm going to put it to 50% and choose an appropriate size brush with adequate softness. And here we go. So I am just pulling in a little bit more detail in the eye region. So if we look at the overall image, if it feels too much, I can always reduce the opacity because it's an independent layer, and yet it's a smart object. Fair enough? Now, if I decide that, hey, you know something? I messed up. I should have applied some other changes while I was still processing the raw file, as opposed to doing it here. So here's the original base file. I'll double click on it. So by double clicking it, it opens up the raw file for me all over again. And if I now apply some changes, I take the gradient tool and all I'm really going to do is lower the exposure to darken this edge. So I can come in here, I do that. If I want it still darker, I'm simply going to duplicate it so that I have a little more control. And there we go. Basically what I was trying to do is dull down this white. By the same token, I also wish to darken a little bit over here to offset the portrait. So, and I'm going to reduce the contrast a wee bit. That doesn't look too bad. And once I've done this, I hit OK. And you will notice this file and you will see the changes. So that's whatever I changed at the raw stage through the smart object, I have successfully applied it again in here without doing it. So when I said OK, it updated the file. I hope this helps.